All right, Orla, welcome. And welcome everybody here. This is the final session of the first day of RevCon. I'm I'm Jared, co-founder of RevGenius, and I'm so thrilled to present Orla Clifford, the VP of Ops at Sigma Computing. And I want to take a minute to say a big thank you to Sigma Computing, who are our diamond partners for RevCon. We wouldn't be able to do it without you. Also, following RevCon, we will be releasing an ebook with Sigma that's spectacular all around planning. But first, today Orla is going to talk about 5 things that RevOps teams should know during the planning season. And we're going to start with a small video from Sigma.
You've modernized your data cloud, but do you have a modern intelligence cloud? With the familiarity of a spreadsheet, enterprise-grade security and governance, and cloud scale, Sigma empowers everyone to data confidently. Analyze, collaborate, act. Know your past, action your present, predict your future. Sigma, where business works with data.
Thank you, everybody, and welcome. I'm just going to share my screen here, and as I do that, let me introduce myself to you all. So my name is Orla Clifford. I am keenly aware that I am standing between you all and either drinks or networking, so I promise that I will make this as entertaining as I possibly can. As I said, my name is Orla Clifford. I run operations here at Sigma Computing. And as you just saw in the video, Sigma is a data analytics and BI platform specifically built for the business user. The basis of our interface and our platform is a spreadsheet-like interface. So for those of you that have grown up like me, being very familiar with doing all of your analysis and all of your understanding of your business and the performance of your business on a spreadsheet, Sigma is a platform that will feel very familiar to you. And being familiar with your platform when you're doing data analysis is probably one of the most important things that I believe to be true about planning season. So a little bit about my background. This is definitely dating me, so I was almost hesitant to say it, but I have over 20 years, which is terrifying, of running and contributing to annual planning processes. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to share with you a few of the things that I have learned over those 20 years about how to run as effective, or maybe better way of saying this, with run a planning process with the least amount of friction possible. And over the next 25 minutes, you're going to learn some tips and tricks from me that hopefully are useful. Okay, so getting into it, if I can move slides forward. As I said, 5 key tips and tricks. So you know how it is. You're in planning process, annual planning process, and everyone is angry at everyone else. Everyone thinks that the planning process is being mean and that the outcome and the goal that's being assigned to the individual is unfair. Also, everyone has forgotten everything that they learned about planning from the prior year, and that has to be relearned over and over again. I'm sure that with knowing the people that are on this call, you are familiar with that experience, and I have no doubt that there are some of you, like me, that are in the middle of that cycle right now, this very moment, as we go towards the end of our fiscal year. I find in running through planning processes that there are 5 things that can help. Doesn't mean that everybody isn't going to be angry with you at some point, I got to be honest here, but that there are at least things that can help remove some of the friction that exists in that process and help keep it as productive as possible. So those 5 things, again, not rocket science, not rocket science for sure, but being truly data driven. We're going to talk about what that means. For me, it means being truly data driven down to the very most granular level of detail. There is be simple. This is one where I will have to admit, this is one of those tips that I will say: do what I say, not what I do. I struggle with simplicity, but nevertheless, I do find that it is one of the most valuable ways in helping to run an effective planning process. Number three, planning is not a one-time process. It's very iterative. And over the period of 12 to 15 weeks, you will run through the same steps multiple times. But they're important because they're almost like dealing with the 5 stages of grief. Talk about that in a moment. The fourth is probably, I think, one of the most important steps in planning. And again, it's one that's easy to overlook. Ultimately, you got to sell a plan. They got to sell to the sellers. You got to sell to the people that are going to own the goal. We'll talk a little bit about that. And then lastly, I laugh. I genuinely, I do laugh about the fact that we call this an annual planning process, because I don't know if you're like me. When was the last time you ran a planning process once and then left it alone? I mean, I'm going to say for me, that was probably back in 2001, 2002, but a very long time ago. Planning is a constant process, and particularly when you work, like I'm sure a lot of you do, in high growth, late stage private companies, we're constantly iterating and learning on our process. So we're going to talk a little bit about measurement and then measurement again. Okay, let's get into it. So firstly, being truly data driven. This is, again, nothing that is going to be absolutely revolutionary to anybody on this call, but nothing will kill a financial plan more than having stale data or having data that is too high level or too aggregated. I truly believe that the first and most fundamental part of any planning process is really spending your time in understanding your actual data. You have to be able to go right down to the line item level detail to be able to truly understand what is your performance year to date telling you about how you should plan for the next stage, how you should plan for the next iteration of your plan, whether that's for a full year or for a quarter. You have to be able to look at things like saying, if I say my productivity is 1.1 million for across, all of my 100 reps, is that 1.1 million been driven by one deal and one rep? And do we think that performance is repeatable? Or on the other side, is a low productivity for a given region, is that being driven by one rep that underperformed? And indeed, knowing that is also very useful as well. So I do think that one of the most fundamental things that I have learned in my time is that the more that you are truly adverse with your data, the more that you can speak to that data and your actuals with authority, with certainty, the better and more easy it is to get into a conversation with the stakeholders on your plan. From a tools perspective, this is something that often comes up when I have this conversation with people, as what tools do you use for planning? And I've been a part of very large companies. I've been a part, and currently I'm a part of a much smaller company. At very large companies, obviously you have access to a number of tool planning suites, and in smaller companies, not so much. Honestly, for me, for the vast majority of my career, I used Excel for my planning. I used Excel to try and think through and forecast out predictions. Why? Mostly because I wanted to get to, as I said, down to that line item level of detail and be at the most granular piece of information around the data as possible. No other tool really allowed me to get there, and certainly no BI tool did. So I tended to use Excel. One of the things that I love about Sigma, and would be more than happy to show to anyone on this call about after this, is our ability to get to that line item level of detail using a spreadsheet-like interface, but it's live. So that data never goes stale. So you never get the thing that I'm sure you've all heard when you look at doing your analysis in Excel. It's like, oh yeah, that data is like from 2 weeks ago. That's stale. That's old. That doesn't reflect our current reality. No, there's nothing more irritating than that, frankly. But also, there's nothing that will kill a plan more than somebody saying that data is stale. Sigma, you can capture the best of both worlds. Do that granular line item level of analysis, as well as keeping the data live. Okay, let's keep going. The second, be simple. Now, I will be the first to admit, this is one of those ones that I find hard. I love data, and I love building models, and I love being able to demonstrate and talk about all the drivers that go into a model and all the nuances that we've thought through. So being simple when you present the outcome of any revenue planning model is hard for me, but it's super, super important. Over the years that I've learned that as you're talking to stakeholders like your CEO or your CRO or even your sales reps, the simpler you make the plan, the easier it is for people to absorb. You and I will know that there is a whole ton of complexity behind anything that we present in terms of the plan and the outcome of the plan. But presenting things in clear, unambiguous terms to the stakeholders that you're working with just helps them. It helps them get to grasps with the detail. It helps them get their head around the things that they need to think through. So what I do in my early stage of the planning process is think through, what are the key contributors that I really need my CRO, for example, to think about, or my head of engineering to think about? So for a CRO, I'll abstract it. I'll say, you know what, the key thing that I need you to think about for our upcoming planning season is, how do you think our ASP is going to change for a given use case? Or how do you think our productivity is going to move in the aggregate or at a specific regional level? Give me some of those, give me some of those thoughts about how you forecast for that based on the actuals of the data that we're performing. What that does is it helps them to think about, the key questions they need to be able to answer in order to help you move a more complex model forward. So simplicity, as I said, one of those ones where do what I say, not what I do, because it's hard, but it really does make a difference. All right, feedback. Planning is never a one-time process, neither in the planning process itself, nor in the post-planning execution, which we'll talk about in a couple of minutes. I like to think about planning as being a three-stage process. And on this slide, you'll see that I think that it takes roughly 12 to 16 weeks. Now, again, it depends on the complexity of the company that you're in as to whether it's 16 weeks or, frankly, 24 weeks. But rarely have I ever found that it is less than that time. Why? Mostly because the blocks need the time that they need. In order to do justice to the entirety of the process, it's really important that you spend your time in prep. So that first stage one, which is kind of what I've been talking about up until now, is, for me at least, always a 6-week process. What am I doing in this 6 weeks? I am looking at my data. I'm interrogating it all the way down to the line item level and reconstructing it from a bottoms up approach to try and make sure that what I'm seeing resonates with the actuals of the business. I'm then taking that data, I'm modeling it forward, I'm coming up with different scenarios and working with key contributors in the organization, like our FP&A team or the rest of the revenue operations team, to really try and think about, well, what are the 3 or 4 or 5 different scenarios that we might want to present to our revenue operation, to our revenue leaders, our sales leaders, and to the rest of the organization. Once we've kind of gotten what I would call the top-down model, as in, here's what I think are the key outcomes that we can drive relative to a scenario 1, 2, or 3, we can then start thinking about the other half of planning, which is bottoms up. So imagine the conversation goes something like this. We are identifying that for our next fiscal year, we believe if we hire, I'm going to make up numbers here, if we hire 15, 20 reps and we put them in these regions and we focus on these use cases and we expand our TAM by bringing in, some additional product development features, we believe that we can drive a top line number of 200 million, let's just say, for argument's sake. It's kind of top-down approach number one. It's like, that's great. So now if we have a top-down understanding or a high-level goal that we can look at, the next thing that we need to think about is, all right, well, what does that look like from a bottoms-up perspective? Because when you hire people, that costs money. It costs money in commissions, it costs money in salaries, but also, I said one thing in that early stage of the planning discussion, which is, we might need our product to invest in certain features, or we might need an engineering team to, I don't know, deploy new instances on Azure in India, for example. That takes investment. So the next part of the process is going to our engineering leadership team, talking with them, saying, okay, here's how I see the top line model and the top down model looking. And what I believe that that requires of you is to do X, Y, and Z. What do you need in order to help deliver on those goals? And they have to go and they think about that process, and then they give me some expectations on hiring that they might need to do, or investment trade-offs that they might need to make. So again, take those bottoms up inputs and pour those into the model. So now we've got, still in stage one, we've got the data that tells us what we can get to, we believe, on the top line. We've got the bottoms up assumptions that we believe are going to help us build out our bottom line. And then we bring the two of them together. And of course, that's the point at which you start looking at the outcomes. What is my growth year over year? What payback do I believe that I'm getting to? What's my revenue outcome? What does my cash burn look like? Which is so important right now, particularly for private companies that are later stage and that might be thinking about fundraising. All of those metrics become really important. You have to stare those down, look at them and say, okay, I think, scenario 1, 2, or 3 is the right outcome. Then we get into what I would call the hardest part of planning, and the piece that I'm sure that everyone that's here on this call to some extent feels like, oh God, here we go again. And it's true, because every year it does feel like, here we go again. And that is the point at which we iterate. So now me and my merry band of planners have developed usually 3 to 4 scenarios of top-down goals, bottoms-up projections, and we're bringing that back to the key stakeholders. Usually the key stakeholders are CRO, CFO, into the rest of our executive leadership team, and saying, here's how I see the planning working out. And this is where we get into what I would usually typically call the 5 stages of grief. Going from denial, that can't possibly be our outcome, to anger, no, you must have done it wrong, through bargaining, going, well, what if we, I don't know, don't invest over there, but we invest over here? What does that do? Eventually, it's depression, going, oh, I just can't believe that this is what's going to happen. And eventually into acceptance, where it's like, okay, we got a good plan. This is a great plan. Very happy with this plan. This is good. Let's go forward. And the same thing happens every year. Every year we get into the same set of discussions where everybody needs their own time to get on board with the plan that you think is right. And usually, if I'm honest, is the plan that exists at the end of the process the same that we have at the beginning? Of course not. Something will have changed. There'll be some iteration on that plan, but nevertheless, it goes through that process and goes through that cycle. Once you've that done, once you've got your key stakeholders lined up and aligned with you on what the plan and the outcome should be, we move into what should be, I believe, almost the simplest part of this process, but often is one of the most complex, which is selling the plan to the organization. I'm going to separate this from the sell the plan to the sellers, which is my next point, because selling the plan to the organization usually is about taking it to the next line of leadership. And then from that line of leadership to the next line down. So it's selling this in across the frontline managers, some of whom are budget carrying, and in many respects would want to contribute to the plan. So the executive leadership team might be aligned, but they now have to get their teams on board. And again, we go through something, usually a shorter version of the 5 stages of grief, where everybody has to provide their inputs and everybody has to understand how you constructed the plan in the first place. At this point, I'm going to direct you all the way back to the very start, because I present the model and I present the data more often in this stage of the planning process than I do at any other time. I find that it's super, super important that everyone understands, how did we get here? How did you get to this model? What are the numbers that get you there? And often, depending on people's level of curiosity, they need to be able to traverse the data in the same way that I did right at the very beginning, going from the high level all the way down to looking at the assumptions that drove the model, that drove the plan, and then comparing them against the actuals so that from the prior year, so that they can make sure that, yeah, you're not constructing a plan that's not beatable. You're not constructing a plan that I can't be successful with. So in this stage of the process, which typically is coming somewhere in the region of 4 to 8 weeks before the end of the planning cycle itself, I'm presenting the data and the model pretty much, I would say, not if not once, if not twice a week, certainly once a week, to different constituents all the time, taking their feedback and iterating. This is super important. I cannot emphasize enough about how it has been helpful for me to give ourselves at Sigma and at other companies where I've run planning process enough time to really truly get the entire company on board. And particularly when I say the entire company, what I really mean is the leadership team, from the very most junior frontline manager all the way through to the CEO of the company. So if you take away nothing from this presentation, apart from data is super important, being able to speak with proficiency to your data is key. That's lesson one. Lesson two is give yourself enough time. It's absolutely fundamental as far as I'm concerned. Okay, but where you've got a plan, you've got all the leaders involved, leaders are signed up, every manager across the company is accepting the plan, agrees with the plan, they're ready to go. You're done, right? This is it. Like, no. Now you've got sales kickoff. And I don't know, again, if you guys are like me, but sales kickoff is the one event in the year that I both love and dread in equal measure. I love sales kickoff for the excitement and the energy that you get when you go to a sales kickoff meeting. I love the fact that we have an opportunity to really get our sellers revved up and excited about the year to come, that we can talk to them about the use cases that we believe that they're going to be able to speak to, that we can talk to them about the sellers, or sorry, to the prospects that we believe that are going to be excited by what they have to say. We can get them excited about the roadmap and the things that we're going to invest in. Nothing more energizing for me than seeing all of that come together with a group of sales reps at a sales kickoff event. And also, let's be honest, sales reps are kind of fun. So sales kickoff is usually a fun event. The one session that at a sales kickoff event that I both enjoy and dread in equal measure is when you have to sell the comp plan and the actual plan to the sellers, because inevitably, everybody and every seller in the history of all time is going to be, oh God, I don't know if I can be successful with the plan. So if there is one thing that I think about when I'm coming out of the planning process, more than anything else, it's how do I create and structure a communication that sells these plans to the sellers? And couple of things that I have found that are valuable. First of all, I'll go back to the early stage. Show the data in the most simple way possible. You don't need to get into the details of the model, but some of the key assumptions that you use to drive your planning process. That helps ground everyone in reality. This is what we did last year. This is what we're asking you to do this year. It's not that different, because typically it is not that different. So that's step one. Keep it simple, show the data. Step two in constructing a good sales plan to sell the plan to the seller is you have to help them feel like they're winning. I will often, this is like a dirty secret in some respects, but I will often hide a little Easter egg in the comp plan. Because sales reps, again, all of you that are on this call will know this, sales reps love to find the way that they can beat the plan, that they're like, aha, I figured out how I can do something that you didn't think about. And I'm like, great, go at it. All the way better if that thing that they think they've discovered, that thing that they discover about how they can beat the plan, is the thing that you wanted them to find in the first place. The thing that you're saying, okay, the really clever ones are going to figure out that they can get to accelerators far more quickly if they combine, I'm going to make it up here, but if they combine 10 new logos with expansion of existing accounts by 50%, and that they do all of that in the first half, then they're accelerated on into the second half. Don't want to make it too easy for them to find that, but you do certainly want them to be able to draw that conclusion and then share that with their team. That helps them in sell the plan to each other. So hide the Easter egg, hide the thing that's going to make them feel successful, hide the thing that allows them to, I suppose, feel like they're going to be able to not only beat the plan, but beat the plan, get to accelerators, and definitely book their trip to President's Club the following year. So just to summarize again, sell the opportunity, keep the data, show the data, keep it simple, and make them and help them find a way that they can be successful. And then lastly, and by no means least, like I said at the very beginning, for those of us that are part of high growth, either early or late stage companies, or even public companies for that matter, things change so fast, and it's not getting any slower. The market conditions that we operate in today, they can change quarter to quarter, month to month. You can find that new opportunities arise and go away within 2 to 3 months, and so comparing to where I was back at the start of my career, where an annual plan, maybe not completely an annual plan, but it wasn't far off it. These days, I think an annual plan is really a quarterly plan. And why is that? Well, the key thing for me is that my job as a revenue operations leader is to help our leadership team see around corners. You don't ever want your CRO or your CEO or anyone on your team to be blindsided by something happening that you hadn't seen first. And again, the data helps us here all the time. Analyzing, looking at the data, we have a set of key performance indicators established in the plan that we believe we should be performing to. Are we? Do the leading indicators help us to get to there? And then once we know whether we are in a position to deliver, to continue to deliver on that plan, that we can adjust. So if things happen, we can always get back to an adjusted plan that allows us to deliver on those key overall goals. So how am I doing on time? 4 minutes to go. So that's it. Those are my 5 key indicators, or my 5 key lessons that I have learned over the last 5 years or the last 20 years of doing and running planning processes. So just to summarize them again, be data driven. Know your data, know your actuals, know your performance. Spend the time really analyzing the data. Make sure it's live. You don't want to lose the last 2 to 3 weeks of data just because you haven't got a tool or a system that's going to help you keep that live data. As I said, at Sigma, that's something that we use for ourselves. I find it game changing. I would be more than happy to share how we use Sigma for revenue planning with anyone on this call. Number 2, be simple. The simpler you are, the easier it is for people to digest. Number 3, give the process time. You know that it's going to take time to both get through your plan, your part of the planning process, then iterate with the leadership team, then iterate with the next level of the leadership team, all the way down to the part that is the most fun, part 4 or part 5, where you're selling your plan to your sellers. You're at that SKO, you're on stage, you're talking about the comp plan. Sell the plan to them, make them feel like they have an opportunity to be successful. And then lastly, SKO is over. You know what? Planning starts immediately all over again. Measure, 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 adjust, iterate as much as you need to. I hope that this was helpful. I hope that as you go off into your networking session, that you have learned something, and I'd love to hear from any of you that have any questions offline. So Jared, I think you are back.
I'm back. How is my connection this time? I think it was a little wonky last time.
Sounds good to me.
Let's go. Thank you, Orla. Thank you so much. Planning is so critical and so important. Yet not everybody does it well, unfortunately. And so having you here speak and having Sigma have such a great tool for this is critical. And thank you, Sigma, for being an incredible Diamond sponsor and partner. And I want to kick off the networking. So this is what we're doing next. Everybody here and everybody all around, we're going to lean into the networking so you can meet other folks from the RevGenius community. This has been an awesome day. Orla, thank you so much again.
My pleasure. I look forward to connecting with you all. And yeah, if anyone has any questions or comments, you know where to find me.
All right, we'll see you over there, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.